Okay, perfect. You want me to be closer to it?
No,
then?
it's good. It should be fine.
Sounds good. So usually what I do with people is we go through the form itself. We start off with bus, and we just go question by question, and sort of, so you understand that the process that the observer that you're paired with is basically how they observe and how they intake the information, and then submit it in a way that's usable for us. So what I'll do is I'll bring it up. Here we go. So they're going to be filling out the on the bus side, at least, the ambulatory trip form.
Okay.
And so we use Google Docs as a way, to give them the form so they can use their iPads out in the field and actually do it in real time.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through step by step what information that they're gathering and that you should be aware of as well, recognizing that the observer's main responsibility is to fill out the form. But we really see you guys as a team out there, so anything that you notice during the particular trip, you guys should be basically debriefing at the end of each trip, just to make sure that your experience on the bus was actually properly captured as well.
Okay.
So the first grouping of information is very, very fact-based, and just so we can categorize and re-follow up with any particular trip. So the first field off is just purely, the date of the actual trip. And then there's a drop-down box both for the observer's initials and then also your initials as the tester. And then there's the categorization of the tester's mobility device or other devices. In your instance, they would mark off the white cane. Then comes the next information, which is basically the bus info. There is the route number of the bus, and that will actually come, from the schedule itself, which, clearly marks what trips you're supposed to be taking. There is the route destination as well. That also comes off of the schedule, and also both the route number and route destination are displayed visually on what we call the front end side signage. Those are the I think they're LED boards on the physical bus itself.
Oh yeah.
And then also for the most part on some of the buses, the number is in Braille on when you enter the vehicle. Immediately straight ahead of you will be the fare box.
Really?
On the left hand side it's the wheel well, but also there's an equipment box on top of the wheel well. At the very corner on the flat up-facing surface is the bus number in Braille, just as an FYI.
I never thought of that, but because I read Braille, sometimes it's good to know, especially if they don't announce it.
Exactly. The operator's badge number is not audibly announced, but it does usually scroll through on the VMS board inside the vehicle. And then there is a question of whether it's a low-floor bus or not. We used to have the form that had specific questions about high-floor buses, but we have discontinued that since there are so few trips.
Oh, really?
The difference being, on the low-floor buses, there's a fold-out ramp in the front, whereas the high-floor buses have the collapsing stairs in the rear of the vehicle that actually operates as a lift instead of a ramp.
But
you don't have to worry about that. Okay, then there's the bus trip info. There is the boarding location. The boarding location will, as long as it was a scheduled trip, the boarding location is located on your schedule.
Yeah.
And they will be filling out the time boarded, and then what we call, in our jargon, what we call getting off the bus is basically the alight location and the time alighted. Okay. So they will be doing that too. Yeah. That's why before every trip you should recheck your schedule to see what the announced alight location is, so you can you can focus on it and wait and hit the stop request when it actually is your location. Yeah. Then we have 4 questions about whether the signage and announcements are correct. Like I said, the front destination signage should have the route number and also the destination as the side destination. Yep. Along with these 2 visual items, there is an external speaker that is supposed to play the external announcement, and so you should be trying to listen to hear for that.
Now, is that supposed to be on all buses?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. So it is supposed to give the route number and the route destination anytime the doors open at a bus stop. Okay.
Yep.
Also, there is a question here: did the bus pull up to the proper berth/bus stop? This is mainly important in bus stations. Yeah. Sometimes there are different berths for different routes. Sometimes they share berths, but again, the bus that's there should be pulling into the right location. Right. If, let's say, what's one of the bus stations that you're a little more familiar with?
I've done the buses from Davis Square and.
Okay, Davis isn't the best.
No.
Do you have another one that you've gone through before?
A bus station.
Yeah.
I don't use a lot of. Harvard Square. I've done that.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, let's use Davis as an example. You, as a tester, should be standing as close to the bus stop sign as possible to wait for your bus. Yep. Let's say there is one particular bus that is immediately in front of you, but it's not the route that you're taking.
Yeah, that's happened.
At Davis, they really can't get around each other, so they end up doing what we call queuing, where they'll end up being in one long line. Yeah. Let's say you're standing with your white cane right up against the sign. You know the bus in front of you is not your bus. You hear another bus pull up behind it, but you don't hear an external announcement.
Right.
What we would say to you is, you as a customer do not know what that bus is. Right. So you wouldn't really necessarily move immediately because, again, you're waiting at the bus stop sign. Right. It's the bus operator's job, to clear out the bus stop when they leave. If you don't hear any external announcement and the bus, loads a couple people off and then the 2 buses immediately leave and that second bus never stops for you, if that was the bus that you were looking for, we would consider that a violation because what the operators are charged to do in any bus berth for multiple buses or any bus stop that serve multiple routes, they have to clear the entire bus stop of individuals with an apparent disability. And in your example, standing there with the white cane, they have failed to do so. What they really should be doing is that second bus operator should be pulling up to you, just opening the door and making sure that either the external announcement goes off or they manually say it, or in some way they try to make you aware that, this is what this bus is. Okay?
Right. That's, I'm sorry.
Yep, no.
Is it all right? It's a violation if they say the bus 88 bus is behind that one over?
So if someone else, like
the bus driver,
let's say the bus operator that's in the bus ahead of you sees you and calls out, oh, just so you know, there's the such and such bus behind me. Then you, as a reasonable customer, would have been informed and you would have relocated yourself. The same is the case in terms of, let's say, a random customer just ends up telling you. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the T operator was doing his job, but at the same point, you as a reasonable customer would still relocate. So, that is something you would put in the notes section, and we would probably end up following up on, but not necessarily reporting as a pure violation at that moment. So let's say in that situation the external announcement on the second bus was activated. Then you as a customer would try to relocate yourself. What we would ask you to do is walk down to that next bus and make the confirmation with the operator that this is such and such a bus.
Right. Yep.
So that
makes sense.
that's why that external announcement being made is so important.
Oh yeah.
Because it cues everyone to where they should be.
Yep.
Okay, then on the boarding. So it's a question of, did you actually board the bus? There are many reasons why, you don't necessarily board the bus. One of the more common ones is it's at capacity. And when it's at capacity, the operators are supposed to follow a set list of procedures in order to not commit a violation. To any individual with an apparent disability, they are supposed to pull up to you, open the door, inform you of the reason why they cannot board you, call into what we call OCC, which is basically operations, and get advisement of when the next bus is, and they're supposed to tell you when the next bus is. That being said, they don't always do the calling in front of you.
Yeah.
So I say what I ask our testers to do, in any situation where they don't make a call in front of you, we ask you that when you actually do board a bus, you strike up a conversation with that operator to try to see if they were aware that someone with a disability was waiting for them. So something as simple as, I talked to the other bus operator and they said they were going to call it in. Did someone, tell you that I was waiting out here, or something of that sort, to try to determine
verify that.
Whether or not. Then they also determine is, does the bus pull to the curb or not? Yes or no. Again, they're supposed to be doing so. If they don't pull to the curb, one of the reasonable accommodations that you can request is if you ask them to reposition the bus. Just so I have a little better understanding about with your vision, could you be able to by yourself sort of like identify a location nearby that it would be reasonable for the bus to reposition, or is that?
I probably most of the time, but I mean it depends. I mean on the what the lighting would be, if it was really glare, or if it was at night.
Okay, and I leave it up to the testers in terms of what they are comfortable in doing. If it is a situation where you can identify a reasonable location where the bus could pull to the curb, certainly that is something that I want you to feel comfortable in doing. Just so you know, the overall rule that I like our testers to be, to think about is, whenever making a request of an operator, be as specific as possible.
Right.
Be specific as possible. Be explicit about exactly what you're asking for.
Right.
Because whether it's true or not, operators who don't necessarily want to help you will always claim that they were just confused about what specifically you were asking. Right. So anytime, just focus on, is there any possible way that this operator could say, oh, I didn't know what they were asking. Right. And just in general, for any reasonable request, we ask you to, it's hard to always have a concrete rule, but ask about 2 to 3 times, or until the operator gives you a specific reason why they're not complying with the request. Like, let's say that you ask for the kneeler. So, can you please kneel the bus all the way? The operator immediately says, the ramp is broken. The kneeler is broken.
Right.
At that point, he's given the operator's given a very clear reason. So there is no. What we're here to do is try to determine if the operator is actually doing their job.
Yeah.
Our job is not to complain or harass the operator to do their job.
That wouldn't be very productive.
Because again, we're trying to recreate an average customer, and an average customer is not necessarily want to get into basically a huge argument each and every single boarding time.
Yeah.
So just let's say, the first response was like what or something like that.
Yeah.
Just repeat the request.
Right.
Whatever makes sense in the moment to sort of like we have reasonably satisfied, conveying to the operator what exactly you're asking for, without harassing them to do their job. So you're gonna find that good balance. Okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we've talked about repositioning the bus. We've talked about kneeling the bus. Sometimes some of our ambulatory customers ask for the ramp. That really depends on the situation there, on the boarding and on the lighting. Again, you'll end up getting the feel for it. I understand that in not all instances is there something obvious that you personally would need as accommodation, but we like to tell our testers that you're not only testing for yourself, and what you are able to comfortably navigate the system for. We're really trying to test, for a range of different customers. And therefore, sometimes you are going to be asking for something that you don't need help with.
Right.
So, like we said, repositioning the bus, asking for the kneeler, asking for the ramp. The other big one is asking for help with priority seating. Priority seating are those seats towards the front of the bus. Now, the bus operators, and there actually a lot of them are confused about this, but what the rule says is that they, as operators, when someone requests help with the priority seating, they are required to make the requests of customers in that area to make a seat available. However, they are not allowed to require people to move, because there are, as you know, there are individuals out there with non-apparent disabilities. And again, it's up for the customer to determine if they should be, if they want to be in priority seating, not for the operator or for someone else. That being said, this priority seating one is a little more difficult because of what tends to happen is when you make the request, other customers are alerted to the fact or whatever, and they'll choose to self-vacate the area. So when you're making those requests, try to do it while you're still at the fare box area and right up against where the operator is. So getting back to the questions, the observer notes what are the reasons for why the bus doesn't pull to the curb, and then the rule is if you are boarding from the street, the operator should be kneeling the bus entirely without your request. That being said, always give them the opportunity to lower the bus, but if you are boarding from the street, and they haven't kneeled the bus, you can make that request at that point. The next section is only applicable if the bus stop is obstructed. It's up to the observer to categorize what exactly was blocking that particular bus stop.
Right.
And then the next are a couple of sections on reasonable accommodation. First is about the kneeler. Upon boarding, does the operator kneel the bus? Yes, without request from you. Yes, with the request from you. No, the operator refuses to kneel the bus, and no, the operator didn't offer and you did not request.
Right.
Same thing for the operation of the ramp. Did you ask for it? Did they offer? And so on, and whether or not the ramp actually worked automatically or they had to manually deploy it. They are able to manually deploy it. They basically have there's like on the corner of the ramp on the floor is like a cloth band, and they have a literal hook
I
they
think
can
I've
pull it
seen
up.
that once in a while.
Yeah, and then they can kick it down, and
Yeah.
it will automatically, well, not automatically, but they can manually deploy it.
Okay.
Just so you're aware
Yep.
of that. In that particular situation, it might actually be better for you not to ask them to manually deploy, because then they've said that it's not working.
Right,
And that's
yeah,
something we can check up on, and if it was a lie, it's something we can follow up with a
Yeah.
violation on.
Yeah.
The next section is about priority seating. So, is the priority seating full? Yes or no? And do you have any interaction with the bus operator for them to relocate?
Right.
Another reasonable accommodation, another two that you can do from the operator, is you can inform them of where you're alighting,
Yeah.
and ask them, that you get alerted to the bus
Yeah.
stopping. So they should be informing you when they get to that location. You don't have to do that though. That's only if you want to do that. Okay.
Right. Right.
I
Probably would on a new route because I don't know if the announcements are working.
Exactly.
And
So
I'm stubborn me. I'm like, I'll just wait for the announcement. We're in the
Yep.
wrong place.
So again, just let the observer know beforehand what you were thinking about doing, whether you were going to
Yeah.
request it or not, just so they're aware. Because sometimes in locations that are not familiar to
Yeah,
you,
which
what they'll
probably
do
most-
is,
Yeah.
if you have not made the request, they'll just they'll light out of the front of the bus, so they would pass you, and then they would give you like a visual cue or audible cue of
Yeah.
some sort to be like, alert you that this is where you're supposed to be
Yeah, yeah.
alighting. So just make sure that
So
you
that's
communicate.
on the customer then. It's not up to the. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it is up to you
Yep.
whether you want any assistance
Right,
on
right.
finding your alight
Yep.
location.
Mhm.
They are not allowed to require that you tell them where you're
Yeah,
alighting.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Also, with the bus departure, you can make the reasonable request that they wait for you to get seated. But even if you don't make the request, that is something that the observer does note whether the bus operator has waited for
Okay, yeah.
everyone to be seated or not. So I know that's a lot. I mean, do you have any questions about this first half?
No, it makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't say it's common sense, but when it makes a lot of sense putting all those pieces together, and I think it's going to be interesting to get out there and actually do it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we always want you to be aware of, you carry your cell with you the entire time, right?
Yeah.
Do you use any of the real-time apps?
I haven't really done a lot of that.
Okay.
No.
That is something that I really suggest that you look into, and certainly feel free to talk with the observers that you're paired with at the beginning, if they have any tips for you. Because one of the good things is that we do, one of the things that you have to do as a tester is you need to place yourself as close to the bus stop sign when it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it's good to see how far the bus is out. So like with 5 minutes to go, you want to situate yourself near that bus stop sign.
Yeah.
Except in instances like, let's say, in Harvard Square, a lot of the time you have these coach buses, the tour buses, that sometimes block a bus stop.
Yeah.
So you as a tester, or you as a customer, think, if you know that there's this huge bus that is blocking the bus stop sign, there's no way for that bus operator to physically see you. So you probably would relocate yourself either at the end of the bus or the beginning of the bus, depending on where it's located.
Yeah.
You're trying to make yourself visible.
Yeah.
Just think to yourself, if this bus had cameras on it, and some of them do, and it's over the bus operator.
Oh yeah.
And if you were reviewing that tape, would you be able to see yourself and sort of like be ready with other customers to board that bus?
Right.
Okay, so in instances where the light is not good enough for you to fully be aware of the circumstances of the bus stop area.
Yeah.
That's something that you really should be talking with your observer before the bus arrives, just so both of you have a basic strategy about how you're going to try to board the bus if the bus stop is not completely clear. So you guys should really, not only talk about the alight location and sort of like your thoughts about what you were going to make the request for, but also sort of like strategy about how to board the bus.
Yeah.
Because what we ask you to do is be near that bus stop sign and orient yourself so that you're facing where the bus is approaching. So always be aware of which way the bus is coming, just so you know that you're facing the right way.
Right.
And if you are able to see the bus and it looks like the bus is going to bypass you, raise your cane up a little bit or something like that. We don't want you to stand on the side of the road and basically be doing jumping jacks to try to get their attention.
Well, I wasn't in the road, but there was a bus that went by once, and I was, stupid running. Not really running, but he actually did stop and say, "This isn't the, I don't stop here. I'm just passing through." So. Yeah.
So anyway. Certainly for this, we don't want you to run or anything like that. But again, it's one of those. Think of what a reasonable customer would do. You would not endanger yourself, but you would look like you were sort of not hustling, but just making a determined effort to catch that particular bus.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's sort of like that's just to cut down on the amount of, union posturing, basically, to make unreasonable arguments. It's sort of like, okay, what is not from system-wide accessibility, but someone from labor relations that sits down and looks at that video. It's like, look, it's obvious this individual is not only in the bus stop area, but is trying to catch that bus.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And that's actually another thing that you should keep in mind. Whenever there is a major violation, I require that by the next day you provide a written statement of what occurred.
Yeah.
And you can never put enough information in there.
Right.
Where I want to know everything about that trip, from the moment that the bus appeared on the horizon to when you were completely done with the trip, whenever that was.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this has to do with very close gatekeeping, and some things that you might not seem relevant at the moment might have significance later on.
Yeah.
So just think of these two different things. What would someone just viewing a videotape of the entire exchange say that happened? But then also you are charged with something a little bit different, because one of the things that we're trying to change in terms of culture about the T is sort of like an acknowledgement of how certain things T employees do impact and actually affect people with disabilities in terms of attitude and sort of that sort of behavior aspect. Yeah. So you have the very objective side about what happened, but we want to hear sort of like the subjective nature of how you interpreted things, how their actions ended up really personally affecting you and impacting you. Yeah. So we know that we're not always going to include all the subjective aspects just because, but from the statement, I really want to hear that stuff as well, because it does. There are T employees out there that end up doing stuff just because things occurred in a certain way, or they're ignorant about what they're responsible for, and then there are employees that when they commit a violation, they know exactly what they're doing, and you usually, just by how you ended up interpreting things, ends up impacting how we proceed. Like, we had another tester a while back. He had a non-apparent disability, and he asked for the ramp, and the operator turns around and says, "No, sweetie, that's only for the wheelchairs." And she's pulled aside for her interview, and in her interview she says, "Well, I always am very careful and really helpful, you know, with seniors and you know, people in wheelchairs. And you know, she kept on going on in her statement, you know, talking about how she tries to treat everyone well. And it became obvious in it, you know, that was just her mindset, that, you know, people with disabilities, it's always apparent. So, you know,
that's a tough one.
And again, that is something, that is a situation where re-instruction is probably a lot more effective than sort of like a suspension or something like that. That
makes sense to me.
You know, from on the face of it, this is not someone that is looking to discriminate. It is someone that just doesn't get, guess what, it's not up to you to determine who has a disability, who doesn't, and what accommodation that they need. If someone requests it, they are the ones to make the decision. It's a self-determining situation. So again, that's why it's always good, you know, for you to relate as much as possible.
Right.
Okay, so that in general is like the thumbnail sketch of the entire boarding process. The alighting process is like the mirror image of that. Okay, so again, you have whether or not the bus pulls to curb. Okay, and the observer is going to determine, you know, why the reason for the bus not pulling to curb was. And just as a side note, we do ask when you alight that you, at all times possible, alight from the front of the bus. Okay, that enables the you to have an interaction with the bus operator. Okay, so just try to be in priority seating as much as possible in the front. You know, certainly make that request for the bus operator with help with priority seating, and also on a light, you know, leave the front. And again, this will be mainly determined by, you know, by the conditions in the front of the bus, whether you can see if the bus has to be repositioned or not, or whether you need the ramp, or whether you need the kneeler. Just, you know, and sort of let me know too after you've done several trips, you know, sort of like how the environment impacts, you know, your vision in terms of what you are able to see in a very, very quick instance. Because again, the boarding is a little easier because the bus comes up. The alighting is a little different because you really probably won't be able to try to get a lay of the land until you get to that front door. So it is a much more compact timeline. So it would be good for us to have a conversation after a couple of trips, you know, just to get a better sense of the best ways that you can test reasonable accommodation on alighting. Because one of the things that you can do instead of asking for repositioning or the kneeler or the ramp is sort of like orientation. And that's basically like, let's say in Davis they don't always alight you at the same location in the busway. You can just ask, you know, sort of like, how far away is the head house? Because let's say the next trip was like the Red Line or something like that.
That's a good one.
You're asking for something very specific, you know, and you know, you can ask, oh, is the head house straight in front of me, or is it off to the left, or something like that.
That's a good one.
Something very specific to the location. And granted, you know, you haven't been to a lot of these locations yet, but you'll, you know, from talking with you, I think you're going to be very good at learning sort of the lay of the land and sort of like the different variations on where you're alighted at the bus stops, some of the major bus stops. So you'll come up with this sort of like arsenal of reasonable requests on that regard if it's not if it's not that easy on the other side. So again, if they're lighting you in the street, they should be automatically kneeling the bus for you. Again, the observer is asked to classify any obstructions. They're supposed to talk about the operation of the kneeler. They're supposed to talk about the operation of the ramp. Transit Master is what we call the system that actually tracks all the buses GPS-wise. And so that's from the operation side how they do it. But in terms of on the bus itself, there is a VMS, so the video message system, which is the visual, and there has to be an audible announcement as well.
Right.
It's supposed to do that automatically. If the automated announcements don't work, the operator is required to provide all major bus stop transfer points and major bus stops. They're supposed to provide a manual announcement for that. If they're not doing that, that's a violation. Okay? And they're supposed to report any sort of like equipment behavior.
Now they should be doing that just automatically all the time, you're saying?
In terms of what?
Like the announcements and all that?
Yep. So
like you said, they're not going to know if it's a not obvious disability, so they should just be doing it. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. There is an automated system that should be calling out each and every bus stop.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, the operator is charged to make out those manual announcements for those major stops and transfer points.
Okay.
In those situations where you realize that the announcements aren't working, if at all possible, don't make the request of the operator for where your alight location is, because then it becomes a little murky in terms of can we forward it or not. So then you're going to be relying upon the observer that you're paired with, to make you aware of when you get to your stop.
Okay. Yeah.
They tend to have either their smartphones or iPads out, so they have the GPS on, so they have a better idea of where the bus is even without the stop announcements.
Yeah.
Then the final item that they take down is sort of like operator behavior, whether or not there's been any rude or offensive remarks. And we categorize it as sort of like disability related talk, but the focus is if they're giving you a hard time about providing reasonable accommodation, we combine that with really rude behavior in terms of disability, because you're making this request based off of reasonable accommodation for your disability, and if they push back on you for that, that's really a disability related item. So that's a general outline of the overall bus form that they do. Mm-hmm. Then I'll just quickly go through the categories of violations, some of which we've already talked about. One of the ones we didn't talk about is a full-on bypass. This is a situation where the bus does not board or alight anyone at that particular location. The only time that a bypass is acceptable is in a situation where what we call piggybacking. That's when there are buses on the same route, semi-close to each other, like within 1 or 2 minutes. If that's the situation, we don't really consider it a bypass, because one of them is probably running behind and one of them is probably running beforehand. So as long as you get on that next bus that comes in within like a minute or two, then we're really not going to report it.
Right.
Again, bypass is full on. They didn't stop to let anyone on or let anyone off. The other category is failure to board. This is a situation where the bus has stopped. It either lets some people on or lets some people off, or both, but you as the tester do not board. This tends to happen a lot more for those situations where we talked about blocked bus stops. A lot of them to do with there's already an MBTA bus in the stop, and it is a bus stop that is served by multiple routes. So again, it's all about that external announcement. If you hear it, as a reasonable everyday customer would, they would try to relocate, confirm it's the bus, and then board. That being said, I've talked a lot about sort of like this whole reasonable aspect of it. Let's say that the bus pulls up behind another bus, the bus pulls away, and then that bus literally sits there for like 3-4 minutes. There's a bus there. As long as the customer could relocate themselves and reposition themselves safely on the sidewalk, you would attempt most likely to communicate with that bus operator to see if it's the bus you were looking for. And the same thing happens when buses are loading from incorrect berths. If if you hear a bus idling for 5 minutes there, and you've heard the people around you, and you've sort of seen the people around you relocate, all of them, again, after a certain amount of time, you would relocate and try to make safely, contact with that bus operator to verbally check to see what bus it was.
Yeah.
So always keep that in mind. The next one is failure to honor a reasonable request for assistance. This is what we've talked about. The ramp, the kneeler, the priority seating, requesting that the bus operator doesn't take off until you're seated, the assistance with finding an alight location, any sort of orientation assistance upon alighting. All those things. I mean, this is really what we're looking for you to do, is understand the process behind each of these, and then make the determination on any given trip what makes the most sense and what is the best to test on this particular trip. So you basically look at it like you have this arsenal of requests, and just mix and match based off of what the situation is there on the ground. Another thing is, if you have an interaction with the bus operator and you've really already gotten to the point where it is a violation, that's when we ask you to disengage as much as possible. And if you don't have to make any requests to alight off of that bus, don't. So let's say you've asked for the kneeler on boarding. You get to the alight location and you really don't need to ask for anything to safely alight. Don't ask for anything, because we don't want something happening later on that detracts from that overall violation. So once you've I mean, certainly on boarding, if you have to do certain things, do so. But if during the boarding procedure something ends up happening, on the flip side, on the alight side, if you don't necessarily need anything, don't make the request. Because again, I don't want to say fully on boarding, because we've had times where there are multiple violations on boarding. So keep on making your requests on boarding. Just on the light side of it, there's no need to do that. Transit master, we talked about, there has to be that audible feature, or they have to manually be making the main bus stops and the transfer points. And then also for you, it's applicable. It is a violation for them to alight you in front of an obstruction. So let's say they alight you in front of a light post, hydrant, one of those newspaper boxes, any of that stuff, and they alight you in front of it, that is a clear violation. So always keep that in mind. Okay.
Is that the same for boarding? Because I've had some buses I didn't think of it. I mean, at the time, of course, I wasn't in the, but it was there's a tree, they could have moved either went before the tree or after. It was kind of in the way, but not really in the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what you said is like an obstruction, even though it wasn't.
Yeah. In that sense, we would. There's several things I want to say about that. Would we consider it a violation? No. However, that would be a great time to ask them to reposition the bus or something like that. And then certainly make sure that the observer is aware of that, so that they put into notes.
Because you said I'm paving the way for other people. It's not just for me. Because if it was for me, I'd say, okay, I'll just find my way around with the cane. Get on the bus. But
so the answer is kind of twofold. Where no, do we consider it a violation? But there, like you say, there are things we can do around it. To try to prevent that in the future. And then we talked about rude behavior. On the bus side, that is, like I said, the overall scheme of the information that they're grabbing. That being, and again, it's like you say, a lot of it when you say it, it's pretty straightforward, that sort of thing. A lot of it has to do with just being comfortable enough to do it in the field and be able to make those snap judgments about what to do. Because again, it doesn't matter how long you're on the bus. You're basically talking about maybe 10 seconds of potential interaction boarding, and maybe 5 seconds on the lighting. So I mean, all things considered, you know, there's a lot of information there that has to be gathered. And you know, sort of take your time with it. Do you feel comfortable with sort of the knowledge of sort of like the scope of what we're expecting from you?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, yeah, I definitely think, you know, it's gonna make me more observant before I'm actually doing, you know, like, I'll be thinking of that when I'm traveling by myself more, you know, just thinking through the, you know, how I would observe it, be more, you know, objective observer, as you said. So yeah.
And you said you did read Braille, correct?
I read basic grade 1, so I'm not too good at it. But
let me see if Lindsay is here.
It's helped me on an elevators a few times.
Yeah. Right. So I'll be 1 second, Steve.
Sure. We mentioned.
We do expect you guys to follow the schedule. In cases where you want to deviate from the schedule for whatever reason, just give the office a call.
Yep.
The observer, for the most part, is more responsible to talk with the office, but just so you know the sequencing of events. In any time you need to deviate from the schedule, or if there's a violation, what they should be doing is calling the office, leaving a detailed voicemail, and then calling my cell. This is because that way they only have to leave one voicemail.
Yep.
And if I'm out of the office and I see that someone has called me on my cell, I can remotely access my voicemail, so I can immediately follow up and listen to what the issue is.
Yeah.
If you guys need to be rerouted for whatever reason, like weather or an emergency, you know, try to call both. But in that situation, if I haven't contacted you on either, you know, then use your best judgment to modify the schedule. How we set up the schedule is you're on multiple modes for the most part during any given day. So you'll be on bus or some sort of rail. We tend to, you know, like I said before, the shifts are usually 3.5 to 4.5 hours. And we tend to leave gaps in between each trip in order so if the bus is running late or you guys are filling out the forms in between, that you won't have to rush for the next bus. Also, with the way that you deal with buses, it's a little less important for you, but for the observer, if you guys get split up, it really matters what sort of bus you're on. Because let's say that both of you are unsure about where a particular stop is, and you haven't made the request of the operator, and you're like on a 400 bus, which is up in Lynn and Beverly, or you're on a 200 bus, which is in Quincy, and all those buses, they only run like every hour or so. In that instance, it might just be easier to stay on the bus until the end, and then either get off to catch another bus or return with the bus back to the system. If it's something like the one and you guys get split up, it's easy enough for one of you just to go like one stop, get off, and then, you know, one of you walk towards the other so you guys can join up. Because guess what? Chances are the bus stops are only like 2 blocks apart or something like that. So always, you know, talk beforehand
Yeah.
to see if either one of you is familiar about the area and sort of can keep a heads up on when to
Yeah.
alight, but
Yeah.
also keep in mind sort of like what route it is and what, how often does it run, are there
Yeah.
any connections, etc. So
Yeah.
these are, I certainly don't want monitors just to get the schedule and then, that's what they deal with. Just, think
plan it.
critically about
Yeah.
the schedule itself and how your day is going to go.
Yeah.
So I think on the most part, do you have any general questions about the bus
I
trips?
think
Or
you covered everything that I can think of. I mean,
okay. I think that's the majority of the bus. There will be more to talk about once you've been out there.
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's one of those things you need to go out into the system with like the basic knowledge in order,
Yep.
to know what other questions that you have. It's sort of like the unknown unknown. you
Yeah.
know? We also do a lot of subway training,
Yeah.
training,
Testing?
observation,
Observations, yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's
that's
actually a little more simple for the ambulatory testers because generally all we do is stop announcements, the required audible stop announcements.
Yep.
Light rail is, we consider light rail to be Green Line and the Mattapan trolley.
Okay.
The Mattapan trolley goes from Ashmont to Mattapan. They call it a high-speed trolley. It is anything but.
Yeah. I always thought the Green Line was slow.
Well,
I've never
the
done
trolleys
that
are from
one.
like the 50s or
Okay,
60s or
yeah,
something.
okay, yeah.
The rule across light rail, which is Green Line and a Mattapan,
Yep.
and heavy rail, which is blue, red, and orange. On your assigned trip, is there any one particular stop that has no audible stop announcements? Once you get to that point, that there's at least one station on the trip that does not have any audible announcements, that becomes a violation.
Yeah.
What is supposed to happen is you're supposed to board the train. As they're leaving the station, they are supposed to announce the next station is whatever.
Yeah.
As they're arriving, they're supposed to say now arriving,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
As long as they make one of those, then we don't consider a violation. So we really don't hold them to both the departing and arriving.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That being said, that is information that the observer takes down.
Yeah.
But just so you know, anytime you're on that trip and they miss one of those stations for both of those announcements,
Yeah.
then that's a violation.
Yeah.
Orange Line, there are no automated announcements. Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
they all have to be
yeah.
manual, and we really hold the line at they've attempted a stop announcement. So
Yep.
you'll hear that the mic being keyed
Yeah,
and noise
yeah.
coming out. Again, I think we're at the transition point where we're now looking to, okay, was this a functional stop announcement?
Yeah.
Because they're getting
couldn't
much
hear
better.
anything.
They're getting much better at quickly checking the equipment.
Yeah.
So the thought was sometimes it's hard to determine if it's equipment or the
Yeah.
operator.
Yeah.
I think we're getting to the point where, if it's not functionally an effective stop announcement, then they really shouldn't have a pass on the surface of it.
Yeah.
So just think of it that way. Let's say you take the red line from Davis all the way to South Station,
Yep.
and they don't have any announcement for South Station. There's your violation. Trips are a little different on subway, where we expect you both to be either seated right next to each other or standing right next to each other, and agreeing each and every station on what the situation was, which announcements were being made, which announcements were not being
Yep.
made. In real time, you guys should be communicating.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
The observer is also going to note whether or not the VMS, if available on board, is showing the
Yeah,
right
yeah.
station. So, that on the rail is the main thing you have to focus on, and the same thing for the commuter rail.
Right.
Just a general thing about stations. Anytime restrooms become an issue, T employees are supposed to make restrooms available upon request. So certainly report that situation if you ever have the need to use a facility and you are denied. Also, any of what we call the accessible fare gates at subway stations, those are the gates that are they're wider than the normal. Basically, they're wide enough to accommodate a wheeled mobility device. Anytime that those are broken and they're either blocked or closed or anything like that, also report those, because in those situations, a T employee is supposed to make sure that they are open. They are fixed in the open position if it's broken. Okay, so those are two things in general you can look out for in the system. Green light of boarding doesn't apply to you. Bridge plates don't apply to you. Commuter rail is just general stop announcements, the same that you do for heavy and light rail. That's all pretty much straightforward. In terms of availability, next week, when would you be able to go out?
Next week? Probably any day, really.
And you were fine with the morning or afternoon?
Probably later morning, because I'd have to come in, so. Which they probably have time. Do you have certain times you do it, like a day that are more, you're probably not doing too early, right?
No. So then afternoon would probably make the most sense. Well, actually, let's focus it around today. Which train did you catch this morning?
Well, I took the
You took the earlier one.
10 because, like I said, I probably would have been late again. But that's only because I walked from the, park. So, and I wasn't too sure. I might have been slower than now I think I could probably.
Okay, so let's say we could easily do like a 12:30 to 4 o'clock shift next week. And maybe next Tuesday? No, Wednesday. Would Wednesday work?
Sure.
Okay, so Wednesday from 12:30 to 4 p.m. Okay, I am going to email you the 2 forms then that you have to fill out and then get over to ACE to provide your IDs so that they can because you're on their payroll, not ours.
Right. I'll have to work that in too then, because I'll have to do that before Monday then, or? Because
I would do it before Wednesday.
Right.
Let's see. I mean, depending if you have your IDs on you or not. If you don't, I was thinking.
Well, they have photo ID, and what else do they want? I mean.
Well, it's that whole list thing. It's what is it from the different columns? I think. Social
Security card they probably want.
Yeah.
So I'd have to bring. Okay.
Okay.
Photo ID. What else? I mean, what else would they want?
Okay, so